One of the most loved movies of the 1990s is Fargo, which was written and directed by the Coen brothers. Arguably, the most memorable scene in the movie is the Woodchipper scene. That infamous scene was supposedly inspired by an actual crime. We'll cover that crime in this video, but first, I want to tell you about an excellent documentary I saw on Magellan TV, who is sponsoring this video. The documentary is called Township Terror. It's about a disturbing crime spree that happened in 2001, which left 18 people dead. I read true crime stories and watch true crime documentaries nearly every day, and yet I had never heard of the criminal behind the spree. This is precisely why I love Magellan TV. They always have documentaries about stories I've never heard of. They also have a great history section, which features some dark and disturbing documentaries. I recently watched one called Action T4, a doctor under Nazism, and it was haunting. It's about a doctor who took part in the systematic murder of thousands of people with mental and physical disabilities. Magellan TV has thousands of other documentaries to watch, and some of them are available in stunning 4K. Magellan TV can be watched anywhere at any time, on your TV, laptop, or mobile device. You can also cast from your phone to your television. It works with Google TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, iOS, and so much more. Magellan TV has a special offer for criminally listed viewers. Just go to try.magellantv.com/criminally listed and you'll get a month for free. Find something great to watch and help support Criminally Listed by checking out Magellan TV. Number 3. Roxanne Bigelow. Wandering River is a remote hamlet in Alberta, Canada. In the winter of 2011, about 80 people lived in the hamlet, which is about 145 miles north of Edmonton. 34-year-old Roxanne Bigelow lived there with her 38-year-old common-law husband, Trevor Bobochel, and their 5 children. Bigelow worked as a custodian at the hamlet's only school. Bigelow was a dedicated mother who was a member of the parent council at the school. She also ran an after-school program at the local youth center. Bobochel worked as a logger. Bigelow and Bobochel had been together for about 15 years. At times, the relationship was tumultuous. Things only got worse when Bobochel drank. The police had been called to their home several times. Things got to be so bad that Bigelow was saving up money to leave Bobochel. Bobochel knew that Bigelow was planning on leaving him. On the night of March 10, 2011, Bigelow and Bobochel went to bed together. The next morning, Bobochel woke up before the rest of the family. After he got up, he retrieved a ball-peen hammer from his truck. He then struck his 34-year-old common-law wife of 15 years in the head 3 times while she slept. The blows to the head killed her. Bobochel wrapped Bigelow's body in a blanket and then he put her body into the back of his pickup truck. He then went back into the bedroom and flipped over the mattress to hide the blood. He then made the bed. After hiding the evidence of the murder from his 5 children, Bobochel got into his truck. He drove to a work site that was about 40 minutes from his home. When he got there, he asked the foreman if he could use the woodchipper to dispose of an animal carcass. The foreman told him he could. Bobochel put Bigelow's body into the woodchipper, which had 4-foot-long blades that spun at high speeds. It started to dispose of Bigelow's body, but then suddenly the blade stopped spinning. Bobochel had not taken the blanket off her body, and the blanket ended up getting tangled in the blades, which caused them to stop spinning. Bobochel used a chainsaw to cut the blanket free. After that, Bobochel told the foreman he had to go clean his truck, and he drove off. After Bobochel left, the foreman went and checked on the woodchipper, and he was horrified to see that there was a human torso in it. He turned off the woodchipper and he called the police. Less than 2 hours later, first responders were called to a rural road not far from the worksite. Someone had reported that a pickup truck was on fire. When the police arrived there, they found 42-year-old Trevor Bobochel standing near his burning truck, and he was arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder and indignity to a body. About 60% of Roxanne Bigelow's body was recovered. The remains were returned to her family so that she could be buried or cremated. Over 3 years later, in September 2014, Trevor Bobochel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was given an automatic life sentence with a possibility of parole after 15 years. Roxanne Bigelow's mother and her sister were given guardianship of the couple's 5 children after the murder. Number 2. Helle Crafts. Helle Nielsen was born in Denmark in July 1947. She grew up in a small town north of Copenhagen. She attended university in England. After school, she worked as an au pair in France. In the spring of 1969, she was hired by Pan Am to be an airline attendant. She was sent to Miami, Florida for training. She was put up in a motel with the other trainees, and pilots would come by to visit and flirt with the women. It was there that Helle met a 31-year-old pilot named Richard Crafts. They instantly hit it off. However, at the time, Richard was dating another woman. Yet, Richard and Helle continued to date, and eventually, he stopped seeing the other woman. Their relationship often ran hot and cold. Sometimes Richard would blow her off for months, but Helle always took him back. They agreed that if Helle ever got pregnant, then they would get married. But when she did get pregnant, Richard beat her up and she miscarried. She got pregnant again in 1975, and Richard decided to go ahead with the marriage. They were wed at the end of November 1975. In 1976, Richard and Helle purchased a home in Newtown, Connecticut. Over the years, Helle would go on to give birth to 2 sons and 1 daughter. In 1982, Richard joined the Newtown Police Department as a volunteer police officer. In February 1986, he became an auxiliary officer with the Newbury, Connecticut Police Department. Richard and Helle's marriage was rocky. Richard drank heavily and he ignored the children. Helle also told people that Richard was abusive. Helle's friends saw her with bruises and black eyes, and several people had even witnessed Richard hitting her. In 1984, Richard was diagnosed with colon cancer. His chances of surviving was only about 2%. Helle felt close to Richard when she cared for him. In August 1984, Richard had surgery to remove most of the cancer. After that, he was on the road to recovery. In December 1985, he went back to work full-time. In July 1986, he stopped receiving chemotherapy. By the end of summer 1986, any goodwill that had developed between the husband and wife had vanished. Helle went to a high-priced divorce lawyer. Helle was sure that Richard was having an affair. She was also nervous because Richard kept guns in the home and he made his own bullets. The divorce lawyer told Helle to hire a private investigator to trail Richard. Helle hired a private investigator named Keith Mayo. Mayo trailed Richard, and he confirmed that Richard was having an affair with a woman who lived in New Jersey. He even got photographic evidence of the affair. On October 14, 1986, Helle decided to go ahead with the divorce. A month later, on November 14th, the sheriff went to the family's home to serve Richard with the divorce papers. But Richard dodged him, so he never received the divorce papers. On the evening of November 18, 1986, Helle returned home from work. She had worked on a flight that came from Europe. That night, there was a snowstorm in Newtown. The next morning, the Crafts' home did not have electricity. Richard took the 3 kids to his sister's home and left them there for the day. Helle was scheduled to work on November 22nd. Helle's fellow airport attendants arrived at the airport and they noticed her car in the parking lot. But Helle didn't report for work. They thought that this was incredibly troubling because Helle had a perfect attendance record. One of Helle's co-workers, Rita Bonanno, immediately suspected that Helle's husband, Richard, might have done something to Helle. She knew that Helle was planning on leaving Richard. Helle told her that if something happened to her, she shouldn't assume it was an accident. It turned out that Helle had told several people this exact same thing. The Crafts had a nanny, and she was also suspicious that something had happened to Helle. On November 25, 1986, the nanny contacted Rita Bonanno and her husband, Frank. The nanny had the night off on November 18th, but she knew that Helle was supposed to come home that evening. But she had not seen or heard from Helle in the last week. The nanny also told Rita and Frank that she saw a dark stain on the carpet in the master bedroom after Helle went missing. The stain was about the size of a grapefruit. A few days later, Richard removed the carpet from the master bedroom. Finally, a chest freezer was missing from the home. Rita Bonanno confronted Richard and she demanded to know where Helle was. Richard told her that she was in Copenhagen, Denmark, visiting her sick mother. But Rita had talked to a mutual friend, and Richard had told her that Helle was at a resort. Rita became even more worried when she learned that Richard had told conflicting stories regarding the whereabouts of his wife. Rita wanted to talk to Helle's mother, but she didn't speak Danish. She found someone who could talk to Helle's mother, and he called her. Helle's mother said she wasn't sick, and her daughter wasn't visiting her, and she had not heard from her in weeks. Helle's friends told Richard to report Helle missing, but he refused. Thanksgiving came and went, and still no one heard from Helle. On December 1st, 1986, several of Helle's friends contacted her divorce lawyer. In turn, her lawyer asked the private investigator, Keith Mayo, to investigate her disappearance. It wasn't long before Mayo concluded that Richard killed Helle. So he contacted the chief of police in Newtown. The chief did not think that anything sinister happened to Helle, and he didn't think that investigating her disappearance was urgent. He did have a detective interview Rita Bonanno and the nanny. The detective also didn't think that Helle's disappearance was a serious issue. The day after the interview, the detective left for a 10-day vacation. Richard volunteered to take a polygraph exam, and he passed. So the Newtown police felt confident that Richard did nothing wrong and Helle wasn't really missing. Keith Mayo thought that the Newtown police were wrong. So Mayo talked to the state prosecutor. After they talked, the state prosecutor also thought that Helle might have met with foul play. The state prosecutor did not think that it was likely that a dedicated mother would not contact her children for several weeks. On December 19th, the state police got involved with the investigation. Investigators learned that on November 14th, Richard reserved a commercial-grade woodchipper. He picked up the woodchipper on November 18th and he kept it for 3 days. On the day after Christmas, investigators searched the family's home. They found traces of blood in the place where the nanny said she saw blood on the carpet. On the side of the mattress in the master bedroom, they found 5 tiny drops of human blood. Also, on the side of the mattress, they found evidence of a 6-inch blood smear that someone had cleaned up. The medical examiner thought that Helle was struck on the head, and when she fell, she brushed against the mattress. The investigators also found traces of blood on washcloths and towels that had recently been laundered. The problem was that the police didn't have a body. Several officers knew that Richard had rented a woodchipper, but none of them thought it was connected to Helle's disappearance. Then an officer realized that Richard may have used it to dispose of his wife's body. It turned out that a snowplow driver had seen a man using a woodchipper on a bridge in the early morning hours of November 20th. The spout of the woodchipper was directed into the area where the Housatonic River feeds into Lake Zor. The investigators went to the area where the snowplow driver saw the man using the woodchipper. On the banks of the river, they found what appeared to be a piece of mail. The mail had Helle's name and address on it. They searched the banks of the river and they found bone fragments, a lot of blonde hair, and a fingernail with red nail polish on it. Divers searched the river and they found a chainsaw that had the serial number rubbed off. The forensic team examined the chainsaw. They found blonde hair and human tissue in the blades. They also found a blue fiber. The fiber was a match to a nightshirt that Helle wore. Using acid, the forensic experts were able to uncover the serial number that had been removed. It turned out that Richard Crafts had owned a chainsaw and it was missing. He had sent in a warranty card to the manufacturer. The serial number on the warranty card matched the serial number on the chainsaw that was found in the river. Then the forensic experts got Helle's hairbrush. They compared the hairs on the hairbrush to the hairs found on the chainsaw and on the banks of the river. They determined it was a match. The forensic team also compared the fingernail polish on the fingernail to nail polish in a bottle that was found on Helle's nightstand. It was also a match. The forensic experts got the same make and model of woodchipper that Richard had rented. Then they fed a pig carcass into it because pigs and human have similar bones and tissue. They compared the markings on the bones of the pig to the bone fragments found on the banks of the river. The markings on the bones were the same. Finally, an investigator found a human tooth on the riverbank. A dental expert was able to determine that the tooth belonged to Helle Crafts. On January 11, 1987, 49-year-old Richard Crafts was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His trial started in May 1988. Based on the evidence, the district attorney painted a picture of what happened to Helle Crafts. At around 7:30 p.m. on the night of November 18th, Helle Crafts arrived home. As she was getting ready for bed, she put on her blue nightshirt. She had some mail, and she folded it and put it into the pocket of her nightshirt. She and Richard may have gotten into an argument. As Helle was changing the bedsheets, Richard struck her in the head with a blunt object, believed to be his police flashlight. He struck her again, which cut her head open. She then fell and grazed the side of the mattress, marking it with blood. Richard wrapped her body up in a blanket. He then put her body in the freezer and set to work cleaning up the bedroom. The next morning, he took their kids to his sister's home and he left them there for the day. He got a U-Haul truck and then he picked up the woodchipper. That night, he took Helle's body to the bridge. He dismembered her with a chainsaw and then fed her body parts into the woodchipper. Since the body was frozen, there was not much blood splatter. Richard's trial lasted for 2 months. It ended in a mistrial because of a deadlocked jury. 11 jurors had voted to convict and 1 had voted to acquit. Richard went to trial again in the fall of 1989. This time, he was found guilty of first-degree murder. In January 1990, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. It was the first time in Connecticut history that someone was convicted of a murder without a body. On February 1, 2020, 83-year-old Richard Crafts was released from prison. He was sent to a transitional home for veterans in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He served about 30 years in prison. He has always maintained his innocence. Helle Crafts' murder supposedly inspired the infamous Woodchipper scene in the classic Coen Brothers movie, Fargo. Number 1. Pamela Miller. On the morning of May 20th, 1988, 4 men armed with guns forced their way into a house in Dallas, Texas. 52-year-old Sam Wright lived in the residence with his 31-year-old girlfriend, Evelyn Banks, and their 3.5-year-old son, Andre. Wright was a drug dealer. The 4 home invaders demanded $20,000 that they said was owed from a previous drug deal. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. At the door was 25-year-old David Wilburn. Wilburn had an intellectual disability, and he was an employee and nephew of Wright's. One of the armed men opened the door and let Wilburn in. The leader of the gang had Wilburn laid down on the floor. He then ordered one of the other men to kill Wilburn. But the gang member hesitated, so the leader shot Wilburn in the head himself. The shooting was in cold blood. Wilburn had obeyed every command he was given, and he had not provoked the home invaders in any way. After shooting Wilburn, the leader had one of his accomplices put handcuffs on Evelyn Banks. Then they heard a noise in another part of the home. The noise distracted the 4 home invaders. Sam Wright noticed they were distracted, and he took the opportunity to run from the house. As he ran, he screamed to the neighbors to call 911. Someone did call 911. When the police arrived, they found David Wilburn's dead body, but Evelyn Banks and her son, Andre, were missing. After Wright fled the home, he went into hiding. But that evening, he called the FBI. He told them that the leader of the home invaders who had executed Wilburn was a man he only knew by the name of Gino. He said that he had owed Gino $20,000 for 25 pounds of marijuana. But now, he could pay $20,000 to get his girlfriend and his son back. The FBI quickly uncovered Gino's real identity. He was 33-year-old Gennaro Camacho. At the time, Camacho was a wanted fugitive. Nearly 10 months earlier, on July 28, 1987, Camacho was in his hometown, Mercedes, Texas. Camacho was at a bar and he got into an argument with 29-year-old Mario Herrera. Hours later, Camacho tracked Herrera down and shot him twice in the chest with a shotgun. Camacho posted bail and skipped town before his murder trial. After uncovering Gino's identity, the FBI agents on the case became even more worried about the well-being of Evelyn and Andre Banks. It was clear that Camacho would kill without provocation. In the course of the FBI's investigation, they were able to identify an accomplice of Camacho's. He was Eddie Cummings, who was originally from Lawton, Oklahoma. The FBI also arrested Sam Wright. The kidnappers had given him a phone number he was supposed to call when he got the $20,000 ransom. The FBI called the number several times, but no one answered. After a week, the FBI agents working on the case did not think that Evelyn Banks and her son would be found alive. About a month after the deadly home invasion and kidnapping, in mid-June 1988, an exotic dancer in Dallas contacted the police. She reported that her friend and co-worker, 23-year-old Pamela Miller, was missing. The woman said she had seen Miller hanging out with Camacho and his friends just before she went missing. She told the police that Miller had told her that she saw things she shouldn't have seen. In early August 1988, the police got a tip regarding the whereabouts of one of Camacho's accomplices, Eddie Cummings. Cummings was arrested in Oklahoma and he was taken into custody. He was interviewed and he told the FBI what he knew. He said that Pamela Miller had been his girlfriend. He said that on the morning of the home invasion, he and Miller were in bed. Camacho woke them up and told them they had work to do. Cummings said that he didn't get up and he stayed in bed with Miller. Instead, 3 other men, Juan Jackson, George Cook, and Larry Merrill, went with him. When they returned to the apartment, they had Evelyn and Andre Banks with them. 2 days after the home invasion, Cummings said that he and Miller left Dallas and went to Lawton, Oklahoma. 2 days after that, Camacho, Cook, and a third man that Cummings didn't know showed up in Lawton. They left town shortly afterward, and they took Miller with them. Cummings assumed that they were heading to Mexico. Based on what Cummings said, the FBI agents arrested George Cook. After a few days in custody, Cook told the FBI agents what he knew. Cook said that Camacho knew that the FBI was onto him after the home invasion, and he decided to leave the state. Camacho also decided to enlist the help of 26-year-old Spencer Stanley. Camacho used Stanley when he needed something violent done with no questions asked. Cook said that he, Stanley, and Camacho loaded Evelyn and Andre into a vehicle and drove them to Ardmore, Oklahoma. They spent the night in a motel. The next day, they drove the mother and son to graves that they had already dug beside a rural road. Cook said that Spencer Stanley threw Andre into the grave and then Stanley and Camacho shot him 4 times. Then they threw Evelyn into the grave and Stanley and Camacho shot her to death as well. They poured kitty litter over the bodies and then buried the bodies. Cook was eventually able to lead the FBI agents to the burial site, and the remains of the mother and son were recovered. As the FBI agents drove Cook back to Texas, he explained what happened to 23-year-old Pamela Miller. Cook said that after the murders of Evelyn and Andre, he, Camacho, and Stanley drove to Lawton and met up with Eddie Cummings and Miller. They made Miller come back to Dallas with them. Camacho knew that the FBI was looking for him, so he wanted to set up one last big drug deal and then slip into Mexico. He set up a deal with a drug dealer that Cook only knew as Michaels. Camacho arranged to meet Michaels at a bar on June 10th. On June 10th, Cook said he was at the bar with Camacho and Pamela Miller. That night was Miller's 23rd birthday, and she was drinking. When Michaels walked into the bar, Miller was boisterous, and she said she recognized him. She said that Michaels often frequented the bar where she danced. Michaels was spooked by Miller's comments because he was wanted by the police at the time. So Michaels ended up leaving the bar without completing the deal. Camacho was furious with Miller because she blew the deal. In the parking lot of the bar, Camacho punched her in the face, breaking her jaw. He then forced her to get into the back seat of the car. Camacho got into the passenger seat and Cook drove. Camacho ordered Cook to go pick up Spencer Stanley. As they drove to Stanley's home, despite having a broken jaw, Miller kept insulting Camacho. So Camacho reached into the back seat, wrapped his hands around Miller's throat, and crushed her trachea. When they picked up Stanley, he got into the back seat. He noticed that Miller was still alive, and he told Camacho. Cook said that Camacho ordered him to pull over the car, so he did. He then pulled Miller out of the car and laid her down on the road. Cook said that he was ordered to run over Miller's head. Cook said he did as he was told. But this still didn't kill Miller. So he was ordered to run over her again, and he did. This finally killed the 23-year-old woman. Miller's body was loaded back into the car. They went to a vacant lot and got a 55-gallon barrel. They loaded Miller's body into the barrel. The next day, Camacho rented a woodchipper. Cook explained that he had a ranch. He said that the day after the murder, he, Camacho, and Stanley took the woodchipper and the barrel containing Miller's body to the ranch. Cook said that Camacho and Stanley dismembered the body with axes and then fed the parts into the woodchipper. The FBI agents went to Cook's ranch and they found bone fragments and mummified tissues scattered in a field. After disposing of Miller's body, Camacho fled the country and settled in Arcelia, Mexico. At the time, the city was controlled by a drug cartel, so Camacho was untouchable. About 8 months later, the FBI set up a sting. Using an informant, they set up a $6 million marijuana deal with Camacho. To complete the deal, Camacho had to come to the United States. Camacho's greed got the better of him, and on March 28, 1989, he crossed the border into McAllen, Texas. He was immediately arrested by DEA and FBI agents. Gennaro Camacho first went to trial for the murder of David Wilburn. His trial started in May 1990. He was found guilty and he was sentenced to death. In January 1991, the television show Unsolved Mysteries did a segment on Camacho's only accomplice from the home invasion who was not in custody, Juan Jackson. Minutes after the episode aired, someone called the show's hotline and told them that Jackson was working for a soft drink company in Compton, California. He was arrested the next morning when he arrived for work. In June 1991, Camacho and Jackson went to trial for kidnapping Evelyn and Andre Banks. Since they transported the mother and son across state lines, they were facing federal charges. They were both found guilty and they were sentenced to life without parole. Jackson is currently incarcerated at a federal prison in Beaumont, Texas. Eddie Cummings and Larry Merrill were sentenced to 8 years of prison. They have served their sentences and have since been released. George Cook made a plea deal. He was sentenced to 24 years in federal prison, and he was able to apply for parole after serving 85% of his sentence. He was released in June 2010. Gennaro Camacho sat on death row for 8 years. He was executed via lethal injection on August 26, 1998. He was 43 years old. No one has ever been charged in connection with the murder of 23-year-old Pamela Miller. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it interesting, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, if you are looking for something new to watch, why not check out my new channel, Chapter Dark. The videos are mysteries that you can try and solve. Do you have what it takes to solve these mysteries? You can find a link to Chapter Dark in the description box below. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.